Now, with all the very latest from around the world and here at home, it's the ITV News at 10.
Refusing to be de-radicalised, the man jailed for the Manchester Arena terrorist attack. Hossain Abedi plotted the bombing that killed 22 people. Our UK editor has discovered he has rejected a prison programme to help change the way he thinks.
There's some people that are so entrenched in their views, in their ideologies and their beliefs that we just become a holding centre for them.
Do you ever spend any time in here thinking about what the other prisoners have done?
No. That's something you can't really do, you know what I mean? It's something you don't want to do.
Paul Brand was given unprecedented access to a unit where the country's most dangerous terrorists are kept away from other inmates. He describes life on the inside and whether there's hope some prisoners can turn away from terrorism. Also on News at 10 tonight.
We've heard the good news that we might be able to come and see you soon.
That's fantastic. We're looking forward to seeing you.
Families and friends to be reunited after more than a year. A massive rule change for Americans and most in the EU. The double jabbed will be able to come here without quarantining. How Charlotte Dujardin danced her way into the record books at the best ever British start to the Olympics. First, the protests, then the queues. How the French are lining up for a COVID jab. Now you need one to go to the cinema. And dear reader, the lost notes from some of Britain's greatest writers, the find and the fight to keep them here.
This is ITV News at 10 with Nina Hossain.
Hello, good evening. The British prison system involves punishment, protecting the public and rehabilitation, the last of those in the hope that criminals mend their ways and are less likely to reoffend when they eventually come out. But ITV News has learned that the convicted mass murderer Hossain Abedi, who helped his brother kill 22 people at the Manchester Arena, is refusing all attempts to be de-radicalised. To prevent him spreading his extremist terrorist views, we understand that he and those like him are separated from other inmates, even other terrorists, in a prison within a prison at Frankland Jail in County Durham. No camera crew has been allowed inside a separation centre before, but we have been. At Frankland, we discovered extremists like Abedi have their own facilities, while other terrorist inmates live alongside normal prisoners. The prison gates were also unlocked for us at Full Sutton Jail near York. As we filmed across these two prisons over the course of a week, ITV News gained rare insight into the lives of their prisoners.
Its high walls match its towering reputation. In here are housed the country's most dangerous criminals. It's one of two prisons we've been invited inside. Governors opened gates that have never been unlocked for the media before at HMP Frankland near Durham and at HMP Full Sutton near York. We were free to mix with some of crime's most notorious names.
Oh, just so mixed in with that group, in theory, could be like a murderer or a tact offender. Yeah.
From tact or terrorism act offenders to rapists and paedophiles, these men are serving some of the longest sentences ever imposed.
So what's it like to be locked up in one of the most high security prisons in Britain?
It's horrible. There are so many things I don't want to put myself in danger by saying certain things that is going to cause me a lot of problem while I'm in here.
Do you ever spend any time in here thinking about what the other prisoners have done?
No. That's something you can't really do, you know what I mean? It's something you don't want to do.
Yeah, I've been in 18 years, so I'm up for parole this year. Can't wait to get out.
Those still inside the prisons with no sign of release include the Soham murderer Ian Huntley, Millie Dowler's killer Levi Belfield, and until his recent death, the Yorkshire Ripper Peter Sutcliffe. Locked up with them, we understand, are terrorists including Thomas Mair, who murdered the MP Joe Cox, Diran Barrett, who planned multiple explosions in the UK and US, and the most deadly of all, Hashim Abedi, who helped plan the Manchester Arena attack. His brother set off the bomb that killed 22. There are many more in these jails who once trained for other attacks. It's terrorists like these at Full Sutton we've come to film with, who are now coached in the prison gym.
I was in Belmarsh before. It's really crap over there, but here's really good. Generally, Yorkshire people, I think they're nicer people.
Is everyone treated the same in here?
No comment.
But comment was not hard to come by among the other prisoners, whatever the severity of their own crimes.
I hate what they do. It's horrible, you know what I mean? Bombing the Manchester bombs and all that, and the London bombs, and I think it's disgusting.
It's hard to believe when someone says what they're in for. You know, they go, he's such and such, and you're like, you're joking, the nice lad. And you find that a lot.
Terrorists can be nice people in prison.
Well, to be honest, yeah.
Their charge sheets read otherwise, from murder to mass attacks. This board shows all 25 terrorists at HMP Frankland. A dedicated department monitors all their communications.
It's very intense at times. Sometimes it's hard not to take it home, especially, as you know, some of the attack offenders that we monitor are quite high profile. So you're leaving work to go home and see them all over the news. So we're kind of doing our best to make sure that nothing can happen to either the staff inside or that they can plan anything on the outside either.
Most terrorists are free to walk the wings, dispersed among general prisoners. Their cells, like any other. The most violent are put on a wing with close surveillance, and then there are those who pose an even graver danger. This is the Separation Centre at Frankland, a prison within a prison. Journalists have never been in here before. It's one of only 3 in the UK.
So this is the kind of quarters they're living in?
Yeah, that's a typical cell.
So they've got bed, table, sink, toilet.
5 out of 8 cells are occupied. This wing is reserved for the most radical.
I am within arm's reach of some of the most dangerous terrorists in Britain. They have been separated here, not because of their physical danger, but because of the mental threat they pose, their ability to twist the minds of others.
At the minute, it's the sort of Islamic radicalisers that we've got in the unit. That could be far right. Or anybody involved in radicalising the population in the main prison on a wing would go through the referral process, assessment and possible selection.
Their risk of radicalising inmates means they can only talk to one another, shouting through open windows.
You know when you listen to the radio, I leave you to catch your nap, yeah? I leave you to catch your nap. It's 2:55.
They can socialise together in separate facilities where they have their own exercise regime and their own laundry roster. We saw where they cook and where they wash. The Ministry of Justice never confirmed names, but we understand that among the men on this wing is the Manchester Arena terrorist Hashim Abedi.
That's received Indy 5, that's times 1709 in the other.
In the control centre, we watched on CCTV as a man we believe to be him socialised with a former Taliban fighter. We've also learned he's refusing to engage with any attempt to de-radicalise him. The same goes for all but one on his separation wing, despite the efforts of staff like Richard to prepare prisoners for eventual release.
One particular person I was working with, we opened his cell door and he said, I'm not going to talk to you. You're an enemy of Islam. You're an Islamophobe. You're my enemy.
Is there any convincing that sort of person?
No.
So there are some people that you just you can't really work with.
There's some people that are so entrenched in their views, in their ideologies and their beliefs that we just become a holding centre for them.
But when most can only be held for so long, how do you make any terrorist comply with a system they have so radically set themselves against?
Incredible and fascinating access. But what have the families of those murdered by Abedi said about what you've learned when you went there?
Well, Nina, considering that Hossain Abedi wouldn't even listen to the testimonies of those families at his own trial, they are unsurprised that he won't listen to anyone else either. He won't engage in any of these attempts to de-radicalise him. There is some anger, though, among them tonight that he's able to socialise with these like-minded extremists. One said to us this evening he shouldn't be within a mile of another terrorist. Another said someone like that is incapable of change. The Ministry of Justice, though, has a duty to try here, and they insist they are successfully reforming some terrorists. In fact, that's why they've invited us into the prison. They want us to see their work, particularly following criticism they've received after the likes of Usman Khan was released only to reoffend, killing 2 at Fishmongers Hall in London Bridge. And we've seen for ourselves the difficulty, actually, in incentivising some of these terrorists to change. I mean, Hossain Abedi's got 55 years inside. What's the point, quite frankly, in him turning his life around? Others who are facing the prospect of release, well, they're not going to be embraced by society. They're not going to be given their dream job. So is it better for them to hang on to the status that their crimes, that their terrorism gives them within their own niche community? And tomorrow we will be speaking on News at 10 to the psychologists and the imams who work with some of these really difficult characters. They've never spoken to the media before, and they have the unenviable task of trying to untwist some of these most ideologically warped minds.
OK, we'll wait for that, Paul Brand. For now, thank you very much. Thank you. Thousands of people with relatives in Europe and across the United States have not seen them for 18 months or more, in real life anyway, but not for much longer. From Monday, anyone with 2 jabs will be allowed into England, Scotland and Wales without having to quarantine. In other words, their vaccinations are being treated like NHS ones. Visitors from France will have to wait a bit longer, but international cruises can start again too.
That's fantastic. We're looking forward to seeing you.
2 brothers and their families separated for a year, one in Southampton, the other in Spain. And though double vaccinated, he's been unable to visit the UK without quarantine.
It's nice to be obviously living in Spain. This is our home now. But, you know, to be back with family is going to mean a lot.
We've been looking forward to seeing each other for a long time. It seems like that might be within the next few weeks, and that's extremely good news.
People double vaccinated in the UK don't need to quarantine when returning from amber list destinations, which include Spain, Greece and the USA. But people coming to the UK who were double vaccinated overseas have still had to isolate for 10 days. Now, for visitors to England, Scotland and Wales from EU amber list countries excluding France and from the USA, quarantine will be removed from August the 2nd.
We're now able to take the next step and help people to meet up perhaps with family and friends they won't have seen for a long time.
Empty tour bus seats, just one sign of overseas visitors staying away. The sector says today's changes come too late to save the season.
Foreign visitors to the UK were worth £28 billion a year, but as other parts of the economy have reopened, this sector has not.
But in Southampton tonight, good news, with government saying international cruises can restart from England.
It's wonderful news for the cruise industry at large. It's also wonderful news for all of those suppliers that supply us. And just in the UK, we've got 903 suppliers supplying anything from ice cream to oils for the engine.
It's a travel sector worth £10 billion a year to the UK. But some infection experts are concerned about today's travel rule reforms, urging more caution about overseas visitors.
We're once again sort of weakening restrictions rather than strengthening them. And there's no reason to think that the Delta variant will be the last new variant to emerge or enter the UK.
Those planning reunions may see today's reforms as a step towards normality. But with more changes to travel rules due next week, we're still very far from that. Chris Choi, News at 10.
The history-making and record-breaking has continued for another day at the Olympics on horseback and in the pool. Charlotte Dujardin, who won dressage gold at the previous 2 games, waltzed off with a bronze today to take her career tally to 6. That is more than any other British woman. Also making history was Tom Dean, yesterday's gold medal winning swimmer. Today he got another as part of the 200 metres freestyle relay team. That makes him the first British man to win 2 for swimming at a single Games since 1908.
But 5 days in and 16 medals in total, and 5 of those gold, this is still Britain's best ever start to an Olympic Games, and by quite some distance. Steve Scott, News at 10, Tokyo.
The world's greatest gymnast, America's Simone Biles, has pulled out of another final at the Olympics. She withdrew from a team competition yesterday for mental health reasons. Now she won't compete in tomorrow's event either. She's had plenty of support from fellow athletes, past and present, for prioritising her mental health. And she said of her own decision, it's a sign of strength as a competitor and as a person.
It's called a Yurchenko double pike, and people don't normally try it because of the strong chance that they might snap a shin bone on landing. Biles was planning to try this in Tokyo, so everything had to be right.
To explain the fact that she just wasn't in the right place to be able to compete, that's a big deal. You know, these athletes and coaches have been preparing for 4 to 5 years now with the pandemic, you know, pushing it on a year, to perform that 1 day or 2 days or whatever. That's a big deal to have that courage to come out as a team and say, it's not quite right for us today.
Now, there are many who would say that not quitting and being mentally strong enough to withstand intense pressure is all part of being an elite athlete. Those people are very often not elite athletes.
Mental ill health is still seen as a weakness or like a personality trait, but ultimately you would never get to the Olympic Games if you were quote-unquote mentally weak.
Callum Skinner won Olympic gold for Britain cycling in Rio in 2016, but at the Commonwealth Games 2 years later, the pressure brought mental breakdown.
Unlike Simone, I didn't feel like I could be open about my struggles at that time. So my coach and my support staff covered for me to the press and to my teammates and stuff, and said that I had a stomach bug. Even though we're Olympians and sometimes classed as superhuman, we're just as susceptible to shortcomings and illnesses as anyone in general society.
Simone Biles has won more medals than any other gymnast, but in Tokyo she's spoken of getting the shakes and suddenly not trusting herself to perform. A superstar still, but human too. Geraint Vincent, News at 10.
If the government is all about levelling up, as it says, fairness dictates that the disadvantages experienced by disabled people should be among the first to be eliminated. Today, the government set out 100 promises backed with £1.6 billion. One aim is to change the way people think about being disabled, another to work out the extra costs of being disabled.
I manage my condition. It will never manage me.
Janice Tillett once competed for Britain in the Paralympics. Her medals are a measure of her will to succeed. But life, even with the adaptations inside her home and the help she receives outside it, is too often an obstacle course she cannot win.
The step there. Well, the one thing I have to do in life is plan, and always plan. My disabilities don't define me. I'm still that. You know, I'm still a person and I want to give what I can give to society. But I do feel that society does sometimes disable us.
The government aims to close what it calls a chasm of opportunity for disabled people. Among the promises, £300 million to support children with special educational needs, more homes designed or adapted for disabled living, and an access audit for every mainline train station. But the Minister for Disabled People faces criticism that this is all long on ambition, much shorter on immediate action.
Well, I disagree. It's a significant first step towards creating a fully inclusive society.
One example, on railways, you're saying there should be another audit of railway stations, but everybody knows that what disabled people need is step-free access now.
That audit isn't meaning work is stopped. Work is ongoing towards having fully inclusive stations, but the audit will look at the wider picture and again then empower those with real lived experience.
Only a quarter of the railway stations in this country are accessible to me. Hello. I'm going to need, I think, a ramp.
And much more help beyond, says campaigner Alan Benson.
If you want disabled people to get jobs and to work and to pay their taxes, then you need to give them the tools and the ability to actually do those jobs.
A quarter of a century since discrimination against disabled people was outlawed, there is still a long, uncertain journey ahead. John Ray, News at 10.
A bogus gem expert who tricked one of London's top jewellers out of £4 million of their own diamonds has been sent to jail for 5 years for stealing them. Lulu Lakatos pretended to be working for a wealthy Russian. Here she is, wearing the hat on CCTV at the Boodle shop in Mayfair. She told the assistant she had been sent to value the diamonds. The multi-million-pound heist is easy to miss, but take a closer look. She puts a black purse containing 7 diamonds in her bag. When the assistant protests, she pulls it out again, except this one is an exact copy that instead contained 7 worthless pebbles. Outside, she handed the diamonds to an unidentified woman, then fled the UK for France within hours. Well, our government blows hot and cold over vaccine passports in France. They are already in operation. Both French people and foreign visitors need them for tourist attractions, cinemas and nightclubs. Bars and restaurants will be next. They are President Macron's way of trying to drive up vaccination numbers. But in a country where liberty with a capital L is so cherished, being forced to do anything is unpopular in many quarters.
A French reluctance to get vaccinated? What reluctance? The vaccine centres are packed, appointments booked for weeks in advance.
If the objective was to push people to get vaccinated, it's clear that there have been a direct impact and that people were rushing more after than the 2 or 3 weeks before.
The young in particular, having been told they won't get into clubs, bars, cinemas, sports events without a vaccine certificate, are just getting on with it.
And among your friends, has everyone decided, look, we've just got to get this now?
Not every of them, but a lot. 90% of them.
Because it's very new, we don't know really what is in it, so...
So you were hesitant?
Yes, of course.
But now you know you've just got to get it.
We don't have choice.
Macron's policy is pretty draconian, but it has certainly worked in terms of motivating the vaccine hesitant to get on and get jabbed. But it is also energising the vaccine resistant, driving the whole anti-vax movement.
Macron resign, chanted tens of thousands on the streets of Paris and across France last weekend, protesting against vaccine certificates.
I don't want a two-tier society I want freedom of choice.
The vaccines is very bad for us, and we will see that in lots of days or months.
But in the face of the Delta variant, Macron's advisers believed there was no choice but to take a strong line.
Due to vaccine hesitancy also, we had maybe 3 weeks ago or 1 month ago, we had what we call the ceiling, where people began to be hesitant in front of the vaccine. So yes, the Delta variant is a big driver in the introduction of the health pass and other measures as well.
Already there's no getting into a cinema in France without a QR code confirming you've had both doses or a recent negative test. The same with museums. By next week, long-distance travel, bars and restaurants as well. Given how effective the policy has been, France is unlikely to be the last to adopt it. James Mace, News at 10, Paris.
Finally, for nearly a century, one of the greatest collections of books and manuscripts by celebrated British authors has been hidden away. So much so, many experts thought it had been lost. Imagine then the excitement among collectors and academics when it was put up for sale. Its highlights include handwritten notes by the Bronte sisters and Jane Austen. But to keep them all in this country, British libraries need to raise £15 million.
Written in candlelight, but kept in the dark for almost a century. A treasure trove of letters and books by Britain's greatest authors, moments in history many thought had been lost forever.
This letter is absolute Jane Austen gold, because she's preparing for a ball, as I say. She's 20 years old, and It is the only letter in which she describes a love affair. Friday, she says, "At length the day is come on which I am to flirt my last with Tom Lefroy. And when you receive this, it will be over." But there is something about a manuscript in a writer's own hand. We are close to the real person. You know, Jane Austen touched this.
Collected by two brothers in the 1900s, first editions of Jane Austen's Emma. Robert Burns' original Rob Roy. Little Books by Charlotte Bronte, bound in an Epsom salts wrapper.
It's so precious. You can see purified Epsom salts sold by J. West. It's tiny scraps of paper that she's writing on. I mean, the whole thing is just domestic art.
Do you ever get used to holding books like this?
No, you can't. I mean, this is as close as you can get to meeting an author, is touching the items that they worked on.
They're items that a charity says must be placed on public display in Britain near their original homes. But it's a race to raise money to buy them back.
The collection's been hidden away since the 19th century. Now, though, it's due to be auctioned at the end of the year, but that's something the British Library and others across the country say has to stop. They now have just a few months to raise £15 million to bring the books back and make sure they never disappear again.
It's the biggest challenge I've ever seen, but there's an enormous amount of goodwill which will help bring this to the public. And I hope it'll open literary doors, intellectual doors, doors for the mind.
Like their authors, these items have stood the test of time. And after 100 years behind closed doors, these books will face a new chapter, just one that hasn't been written yet. Sangeeta Lal, News at 10.
And that's where we close the book on tonight, News at 10. Thanks for spending the past half an hour with us. From everyone here, good night.